Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the October meeting of the MTA Board. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Good morning. As I said, October meeting of the MTA Board. Mr. Morello, do we have any public speakers?
Mr. Chairman, we have just 3 public speakers. We would ask that the speakers observe our time limit so that we can treat everyone equally, and we ask that they direct their comments to matters that are before the board's agenda today. The first speaker is Matt Shotkin. He'll be followed by Omar Vera. Mr. Shotkin.
Good morning, MTA Board members. I think that the completion of the 2nd Avenue subway is a blessing in disguise. Now, all 2nd Avenue commuters and residents and businessmen will have an alternate way to get to work and back home. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Shotkin. Omar Vera. To be followed by Jason Pinero.
Good morning, MTA Board. Welcome back after a very productive month of October. First of all, I'd like to express a little bit more concerns regarding the 2nd Avenue subway, whether it would be fully complete with all 4 stations, well, 3 stations, 3 brand new stations opening by the end of the year. Because my belief is they should all be open at the same time as they are part of a new line. But like I said, thank you so much for restoring the W train. Within 10 days, we will finally have our beloved subway back after 6 long years of missing in action. So that's a plus. Second, well, more things. Another thing I'd like to mention was regarding the 34th, like the new Penn Station design. That's actually good because it's long beyond time. Since the 60s. Penn Station hasn't had a really good formal entrance since the changes that occurred back over a half century. So we need to have a new design for a Penn Station. That's in the right direction. And of course, I'd like to also thank the governor for further investing in the MTA. That's in direct contrast to his New Jersey counterpart, who's taking cash away from NJ Transit. So that's the difference. The MTA is concerned. New York State's concerned, and that's why we're good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vera. Finally, Jason Pinero.
Good morning. I'm going to talk about 2 things. First of all, they should consider more bidders for the item regarding Verizon, because since that Verizon has so many issues, it should be reconsidered and consider other bidders. And regarding 2nd Avenue subway, we demand explanation from Dr. H and from the food board regarding 2nd Avenue subway's opening date, because in my opinion, since June, I think that it should be open 1st quarter 2017, not New Year's Eve of this year, because they should give time to do the testing properly, not in a sloppy way. So think about it, and by the end of the year, you guys should thank me for the work I said since June. And thank you, Andrew Albert and Veronica Vanderbilt, to be there with us since this year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pinero. That concludes the public comment.
My remarks will be brief before we get into the meeting. 112 years ago yesterday, Mayor McClelland, August Belmont, and William Barclay Parsons got on a train at City Hall, and it was the first running of the New York City subway. 4 years ago tomorrow, actually 4 years ago today, was the second time we shut the system down formally, in anticipation of what was Superstorm Sandy, which hit 4 years ago yesterday. Those are just 2 points of reference. The minutes of the September's meeting have been distributed to all members. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second, any comments or questions or revisions to the minutes? All in favor? Aye. I chaired the Committee on Finance this month, and I report the following. There are 9 procurement items this month in a total amount of $52.5 million. There are 7 competitive procurements in the amount of $47.2 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. Second? Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. There are 2 ratifications in the amount of $5.3 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them. Second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. There are 2 real estate action items which are described on pages 47 through 56 in the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these items, and I move them. Second. Any comments or questions on the real estate items? All in favor? Aye. Now we'll have the Transit Committee report from Mr. Ferrer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Transit and Bus Committee met on Wednesday and reports the following. There are 15 procurement actions this month in a total amount of $66.5 million. There is 1 non-competitive procurement totaling $40.3 million for New York City Transit, described on pages 62 and 63 of the board book. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. There are 14 competitive procurements totaling $26.2 million. 13 are for New York City Transit in the amount of $21.9 million, described on pages 64 through 66 of the board book, and 1 for MTA Capital Construction for $4.3 million, described on page 67 through 68 of the board book. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. There are no ratifications, and that, Mr. Chairman, concludes the Transit and Bus Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrer. The railroads met jointly this month, and we hear from Chair for the Long Island Railroad, Mr. Mitch Pally.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Metro North Railroad and Long Island committees met monthly this month and report the following. There is 1 joint action item this month. The action item requests approval to lease wireless spectrum in 7 New Jersey counties to New Jersey Transit in compliance with an order of the Federal Communications Commission in support of positive train control. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. There are 6 procurement actions in the total amount of $13.6 million. There are 3 non-competitive procurements for Metro North Railroad totaling $4.3 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are 3 competitive procurements for the Long Island Railroad in the total amount of $9.3 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are no ratifications, and this completes the report of the Long Island Railroad Metro North Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Pally. The Bridge and Tunnel Committee report presented by Mr. Merdler.
Mr. Chairman, the Bridges and Tunnels Committee met on Wednesday and reports the following. At the committee meeting, committee members requested additional information with respect to certain items presented this month for a vote. Staff subsequently provided the additional information to the board relating to those items. There are 3 action items for board consideration and approval. The first action item is the approval and adoption of a resolution which will find and determine that the proposed change in the method to toll collection at Bridges and Tunnels described in the staff summary on pages 93 through 95 of the board book will have no significant adverse effect on the environment within the meaning of the State Environmental Quality Review Act known as CEQA. And secondly, to adopt and approve the negative declaration in accordance with CEQA and authorize and direct the President of the authority or his designee to execute it. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Questions? Ms. Trottenberg?
I do have some. First of all, I want to thank Don and the team. I think they did get us, I think, all the information we were looking for in terms of what the cost breakdown is. And I just a couple things I wanted to check on. Want to make sure I understand the operating cost for once ORT is completely up and running at all facilities, $50 million a year. I think one of the questions we had at the committee meeting was, does that have any effect on transfers to subways and buses? I just want to make sure I understand how that works.
That's the net operating cost, and it'll be included in our November plan. That the full cost won't hit until 2018, when we're up and running everywhere, and it just becomes part of our budget.
So, listen, I think it's, just for the record, as we discussed on Monday, I think it's actually terrific that we're moving so quickly to do this. It's something I think Veronica mentioned that her group has been supporting for many years. I think there's 800,000 trips per day through the MTA buses, tunnels and bridges. I guess I can't resist saying there are 2.5 million bus rides per day. And I would sure love to see us move with similar alacrity on some of the things that I think would be terrific advancements for the bus riders in terms of giving them a quicker, more convenient ride. Obviously, things we've talked about here. All-door boarding, some kind of a paperless, contactless payment system. I hope we can bring the same spirit that we brought to obviously jumping from one facility to 8 so quickly on the bridge and tunnel side to the bus side as well. I think that would be great for the city's bus riders.
Mr. Albert?
Don, just with respect to Commissioner Trottenberg's, one of her questions, that operating cost that you gave us, is that inclusive of fees that non-payers will be paying and expectation that we will get those?
No, that's just the expense. That doesn't
Just
include the
expense.
revenue.
Not a net. Okay, thanks.
Ms. Vanderpool?
I want to add my thanks to Mr. Spiro and staff for providing the information to many of the questions that were raised, and I feel very comfortable with the information that was provided. The spirit of my questions was really making sure that there was no significant increase in our existing capital program to move a program that I support, a project I support forward. And I am convinced that the existing capital program and the way that the funds are being reallocated is not adding undue burden into our existing capital program. So thank you very much for that.
And I'd like to echo those comments. I know I had some pointed questions. I think, as is often the case in my short time here, the staff of the MTA had already had the thoughts and answers to those questions before they were asked, and I too am very comfortable that we're not burdening the capital program nor our ongoing operating expenses. So I thank you guys for having been on top of it before we even asked those questions.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Vitale. Mr. Saul?
I had a long discussion with Jim this morning about some of the costs involved in doing this program on an expedited timetable. And the one concern I have, and Jim's assured me, is you realize that this $502 million capital expenditure, for mostly for the change in the toll booths, is going to be done on a non-bid, sole source basis. And Jim has told me that they're going to have a very careful estimate and very careful analysis of where we go with these sole source costs, because we're spending $500 million here on an accelerated basis with no bids. And I just want everybody to be aware of it. I feel Jim has got good control over this, but I would like to see him report back to the committee and the board as to how we come out on these sole source contracts to redo the toll plazas. Jim and I, after discussing it with you, I'm sure you will, but I would like to see an analysis of what actually happens over the next, 6 months or so?
I think over the year, Bridges and Tunnels can be transparent to the board and discuss the costs and expenses as we move forward throughout the year. It's very predictable what we're going to do. This is not a one-time build for us. We've deconstructed toll booths before, and we've changed and built toll plazas before. Our engineers and procurement people are very familiar with unit costs and labor costs. And the prime contractors that are associated with larger projects at each of the bridges and tunnels are the ones that will get the change orders to move this along quicker. I want to make it perfectly clear to the board that during the year, bringing forward and expediting projects has been one of the goals of the MTA, to change the way we bring forth these projects. Not only to bring them to an end quicker, but for our customers. I think we all know and we all receive complaints from our customers that this ongoing construction, this endless construction that they see, it bothers them. It simply bothers them that there's no end to construction. So we feel this expedited way in which we're going to move forward in bringing ORT to the customer, we think it would really be harmful to the customer if we completed the work on a capital side and then came back to deconstruct things after we designed and bid and build. The design bid build process is so long, and then we would be in the middle of what we would consider a nice project, ORT, getting rid of those toll booths and everybody moving along quickly and seamlessly through our facilities, and then we come back with the construction equipment and all the things associated with it. We just think that's wrong for our customers, somewhat unsafe, because driving through construction sites are simply a little bit more dangerous than driving through non-construction sites, and definitely safer for our employees. So that's why we made these choices. And we will report back to the board throughout the year on the costing, Andrew.
Mr. Burdler? Mr. Chairman, the first experiment, and successful experiment, with Payless Toll has been on the Henry Hudson Bridge in Community Board 8 of the Bronx, on which I serve. And as Jim will tell you, from day one, he and I have been in communication and making sure that the bits and pieces of that work. And I can tell you from personal experience and on behalf of the people who live in that area of the Bronx and Westchester and Connecticut who come through there, that we have a diminution of frustration on the part of automobile drivers parking hours on end, trying, particularly on weekends and on holidays, to get through. We have a diminution in pollution. We have traffic moving in a safe and orderly manner. It is something that is clearly in the public interest. And the governor's plan and desire to expedite the process is one that is equally important. As Andrew Saul will tell you, I have joined him for some years now in being among those who have focused heavily on making sure that there are controls over sole source and to maximize competition in the area. I believe that we have demonstrated, this agency has demonstrated at the Henry Hudson Bridge, that those things can all be achieved on an expedited basis, and that they can be done with full, complete, transparent monitoring, as Jim Ferrara has done there, and as he has said will occur here. It seems to me that the governor is not only 100% right, but more, in saying it's time to move, it's time to get New York City and New York State moving, and again, I move the resolution.
I'd like to thank the board members for their comments today, but actually for the interchange we had on Monday. I said in the Finance Committee, I watch all the committee meetings. I do. I listen to them. I think the dialogue was a very good one. We needed to provide some additional information, and we did. I will reiterate the one comment I made at the Finance. We cannot forget our motorists. We're one of the only agencies in the country that is able to transfer over some $900 to $1 billion to subsidize the other aspects of the operations. We cannot forget the motorists. Much like we put bus time in for the bus customers, We've made enhancements in the form of trying to improve the environment for buses. We're accelerating the installation of countdown clocks, which cost money but provide a benefit. We're trying to go to open road tolling so we can improve that experience for our customers. And like I said, anybody who's been on one of the bridge and tunnel facilities on Mother's Day knows the backups from those traffic jams are such that ones that could be eliminated if we had open road tolling. Okay, enough discussion. Could I have a vote on the item? All in favor? Aye. Opposed or abstained?
Mr. Chairman, there are three the next action item requires and requests approval and adoption of a resolution changing the method of toll collection, the bridges and tunnels described in the staff summary on pages 97 through 100 of the board book to cashless all electronic open tolling. The committee recommends this action item and I move it.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the final action item requests the board to approve a resolution authorizing the president of the authority or his designee to take all steps as may be necessary to revise the authority's toll violation enforcement regulations as described in the staff summary on pages 102 through 108 of the board book. The committee recommends this action item and I move it.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
There are 5 procurement actions this month in the total amount of $142.8 million. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 5 competitive procurements in the total amount of $142.8 million. The committee recommends these procurements and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are no ratifications. This concludes the Bridges and Tunnels Committee report, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdler. Now I'd like to go into executive section pursuant to Section 105, subset 1D of the New York State Public Officers Law for matters related to proposed, pending, or current litigation. May I have a motion? Second. All in favor? Aye. We'll go in here for executive session and we'll be back out to conclude the meeting. We've completed our executive session. We're reconvening the board. That concludes all formal business for the October board meeting, the MTA. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Tom, good morning.
Morning.
So, sort of a two-part question on the 2nd Avenue subway. One is, at this point in 2015, 2 months out, we got a specific revenue service date on the 7 extension. I remember it was the July meeting. Dr. H said September 13th, stuck to that date, opened. At what point do you need a specific revenue service date as opposed to by December 31st?
We're in a little bit different place here because of the level of effort being expended to get it done. There will be a date at which we have to say we're going to make it, we're not going to make it. Right now we're still confident we're going to make it. We're applying a lot of resources to address the issues that are out there. So that's getting the finished construction work done, that's dealing with code issues, and dealing with critical testing and commissioning. And we've parceled that work out in a priority manner, so that we're making sure that we're getting most effective utilization of the resources we apply to it. People who ride the Lexington Avenue subway on an everyday basis would love to see some of that load taken off the Lexington Avenue line. So on a day-by-day basis, the priority importance of getting 2nd Avenue open has been impressed upon us, and we agree. So that's what's going on. So it's too early to say now at what date, but there will be a date at which we say, yeah, for sure we're going to make it or no.
And then just sort of as a follow-up to that, when the independent engineer said some of the safety tests won't be complete until December 14th, I think he said for 86th Street. If that schedule held, could you open the next day, or do you, at the end of the safety checks, do you then have protocols that have to go into place?
December 14th is 17 days before December 31st. One of the difficulties I think Ken Haggis has, he's the independent engineer, is trying to predict what will occur in the future based upon what's occurred to date. And the reason that's difficult is if the progress to date is at a level of resource of N, but we're adding M to that, the rate of improvement or closing out of issues is going to increase. So, and that's what we're doing, because we're applying more and more resources to this to make sure that it gets open on time.
Okay, and you're now playing the role of Emma Fitzsimmons from New York Times.
Emma's sick, and she asked if I would ask about bus ridership and bus service. What do you say to people who depend solely on buses, who sometimes feel as though all the resources, effort, and energy go to the subways? You've heard ongoing complaints about the reliability of bus service lately. Where do buses rank in terms of the MTA's priority and what you're doing to improve it?
Because I spent a good part of my career in the Staten Island Division running the railway system out there, but 2 bus depots, which is now 3+1, and some 800 buses, I can tell you an awful lot of time and effort is spent on buses. Perceptively, I think people look at New York City as the subway. They just do, okay? But we carry 2.5 million people. And in Jim Dwyer's article today, he mentioned the fact that that's more than a lot of other transit systems combined. So there are people that are dependent upon it to get to the subway. There are people that are dependent upon it for all of their journey. What we're struggling with is a number of competing priorities across 2 different agencies. We're thankful to have Polly Trottenberg as one of our board members. We're very aligned with DOT. There are issues that they control in terms of the street furniture, dedicated lanes, signal preemption, things of that nature. The things we control in terms of how we assign buses, how we dispatch buses, how we work with them for SBS routes, for example. And we need to make improvements across a pretty broad front. The bottom line is, how do we speed up the process of getting people from point A to point B in what is the most congested city and downtown in the Western Hemisphere, well, in the United States. And those challenges are ones we're working on jointly together. We need to get to a point where the reliability and the frequency and the surety of getting from point A to point B is in people's mind enough that they're riding the buses on a continual basis.
The board members today were obviously pretty content with the breakdown for the funding of the ORT. Could you provide that breakdown for us here, give some clarity beyond savings and efficiencies?
We'll do that in writing later. I'm not going to do it off the top of my head, but there's a couple of takeaways. First of all, I think there's, if not unanimous, exceptionally strong consensus support for the move toward open road tolling. The days of collecting tolls manually, stopping people at a booth with a gate, are behind a lot of people. And so we need to do that. We need to do it in the balance of the most cost-effective way, but also the most efficient and quick way. We've had a tendency I've been here now 25 years in 2 different stints, and we've had a tendency sometimes to focus so much on a contract cost and making sure we're getting the exact amount of money out of every contract we have, but we will impact people 2 and 3 times. I'm not proud to say, but when I was either head of subways or at New York City Transit, we would come back and repeatedly impact people on the number 7 line, take the express service out because we're doing construction. And I remember one of the borough presidents say, can't you just combine some of that work and do it all at one time so you don't come back 2 years later and do it again and come back 2 years later after that and do it again? So it's all that. In sum, in answer to your question, what we're doing is we're avoiding a certain amount of work by accelerating the move to open road tolling. That money that is saved by de-scoping that work, like replacing toll booths and rebuilding the toll plaza in place, is transferred over into some of the improvements we need to make to implement open road tolling. It's not quite a net wash, but it's, I think, in the double-digit million, 13, 25 million. And we think we can get other economies of scale to drive that in. But the other issue that I want to point out is that for the people on the motorist side of the house, we need to show them we're not just doing state of good repair. We're doing things to improve their commute. We knowingly and consciously make that decision on the subway side, on the bus side, countdown clocks, that costs money, but it's an improved level of service. So to speed up their travel and keep them from waiting in a line, we think that's a worthwhile investment.
Hi, Tom. Now, having met in executive session, can you tell us if there's any more clarity on what you'll do with the Long Island Railroad freight contract?
Well, first of all, we're very concerned. It's very important that we have a successful movement of freight on Long Island for a lot of reasons. There was an FRA report with respect to deficiencies that the New York and Atlantic Railway had. There's one point I want to make. I'd made it in that room. I'll make it publicly. An organization can contract out the responsibility for moving freight. It cannot contract out the accountability for it. And the senior management and executive management at the MTA and the board are unanimous in their belief that we have to make sure that this particular freight operator is doing anything and everything that it belongs to assure that accountability that we own is being met.
If I could follow up, you said this operator, does that suggest that they will be sticking around?
We have a number of options on the table, and we're going to review all of those options.
In terms of Second Avenue Subway, is the MTA committed to, if all three of the stations are not open, to going ahead and opening one or two of them, or even one if that's what happens?
It's too premature to make that determination for a variety of reasons, not the least of which we don't want to take the proverbial foot off the accelerator. In an ideal way, we want to open it up and have every station available. So it's premature to have a conversation along those lines.
Does all the back and forth with Second Avenue, and even looking forward to the next 9 weeks, which will be exciting because we have contracts coming up too, transit
So
workers
there's
contracts.
something important on November 8th.
Yeah, and election, yeah, which I am being held in suspense by that. I feel that I'm being held in suspense a little bit about Second Avenue too. But we also have fare and toll hike hearings come up. So does all this suspense make your job even more difficult when we have those?
It's not without its challenges. But in answer to your question, yes. No, whenever you have 7 West, whenever you have, in the 80s, we had the new routes going over to Queens. We put the transit authority in the upper level of 63rd Street subway. Yes. You get a certain amount of adrenaline flowing because of that, because there's a level of excitement, and so you do it. But it is added to all the other responsibilities you have. So I don't want to be curt with you, but yeah, it is challenging, but there's an esprit de corps across all the agencies here. You will see it in emergencies. You will see it in storms. You'll see it in high-level objectives that people want to achieve success. And they do it. They love their job, they love what they're doing, and they love the constituents they represent.
Some good questions from my colleagues, so I'll ask something a little bit broader. On Wednesday, when you had the committee meetings, it was a pretty good debate about this, the issue of open road tolling. So I just kind of want to get your thoughts on, how important are these committee meetings? How important is it for the board members to be engaged in this, and what value do you think it brings?
I think it brings a lot of value. I think we'll toot our own horn for a minute. We're very transparent. We have probably more open meetings than other agencies. I'm not being critical of them, but we're a large entity. We affect a lot of people. So we go through a series of operational committee meetings and finance meetings, 2 days before the board meeting, and there's an air in a discussed way of all of the issues. The board members strongly believe that they need to have that ability to have that. I endorse that as the CEO and the chairman, and you will see that play out in a very public way. And then we do get to a board meeting. In some cases, we have to table issue, come back with more information. In this case, we were able to get it to them. And I can truly say this board exercises its authority in terms of fiduciary responsibility and what we're supposed to achieve as an organization, and it makes informed decisions in a very public, visible way. So I'm proud to be part of the organization. Thank you.